With Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Today is not, as it is customarily, the first day of school for 2 million kids in Ontario. But that day is coming, and tonight Minister of Education Stephen Lecce is here on the province's much-debated plan to get students safely back to class beginning this week and next. Then, do the federal Liberals want a fall election? That and what other summer politics hath wrought. It's Tuesday, September 8th, and all that kicks off Season 15 of The Agenda. In March, schools across this province closed their doors to protect students from COVID-19. They've only just started to reopen as teachers and principals prepare for a staggered start that began for some today. Premier Doug Ford says they've pulled out all the stops, spared no expense, thrown everything at this problem. Teachers, parents, and students still have questions and a few doubts. Let's see if we can get some clarity for them from Ontario's Minister of Education, Stephen Lecce. He is the PC member for King Vaughan, and he joins us now from his ministry office on University Avenue across from Queen's Park. And Minister, it's good to have you as our first guest for this, our first program of Season 15. I would just like to start with this. What is the most up-to-date information you have as to what percentage of students are going to be back in the classroom at some point this month as opposed to learning online?
You know, we're estimating about 75% of students will be in class, the remainder online. And Steve, we're the only province in the country that I'm aware of that have a credible concurrent program of teaching both remotely and in class. That's a strength. And I'm grateful to the teachers doing education online and in class, providing that mentorship and leadership at a time when young people need it.
What does that 75% number say to you about the level of confidence people in Ontario have with your plan?
Well, I don't, presuppose what's happening in individual homes, Steve. You know, as you can appreciate, there are many parents with immunocompromised children or respiratory challenges that the parent may have, or living with an aging parent or grandparent. I mean, we have to be respectful of parents' choice, and we have been. What I can tell you is that a critical mass are choosing in-class learning. That is positive. It will be safe. But we've also strengthened the online option because we believe that we shouldn't have an unequal system of learning. We need to bridge that gap and then make sure the young people get access to their teacher through live synchronous learning, which is the basis for us expanding dramatically the expectations, putting 75% of that learning experience to be done live, Zoom-style learning, which we think is important.
Okay, I guess I should say in fairness that darn near everybody I talk to thinks kids ought to get back into the classroom, provided it can be done safely, that it's important to get kids back into the classroom. I guess what I want to know is, you've been taking advice from all sorts of people to make sure that can happen safely. When is the last time you had a significant and or meaningful conversation with the teacher representatives, either the head of the elementary teachers union or the secondary teachers union, to get their advice?
Well, I've tasked the ministry to be in constant contact with our partners on the ground, including our educators, likewise our unions, and of course our school boards. We've had over roughly 200 meetings since we closed schools in March with our teacher federations. We value their opinion, the front line.
What about you, though, Minister? When's the last time you spoke to the heads of the teacher unions?
I would have reached out to them. Of course, I would have done outreach to them in the summer. We had points of contact. Particularly starting on the first day when we closed schools, reaching out to them to affirm the importance of cooperation. And I think what I've underscored to them throughout the pandemic is that we're prepared to listen. But of course, the default's got to be the medical leaders when dealing with a pandemic. And that's what we've done. We've made sure that that frontline perspective is being reflective of our plan, at the best of our province is reflected from an educational perspective. But most importantly, I think what parents expect is the focus on the health and safety of the kids, both mentally and physically, which is the basis for our plan and those investments and those layers of prevention that we've unveiled.
Well, you say you're prepared to listen, but of course, if you had been listening, you would know that they are saying that they have grave doubts about your plan, that they think 30 kids, as many as 30 kids in a classroom, is far too many. They are dubious about the amount of distancing that can take place and whether, of course, I shouldn't describe them this way, but you know, snot-nosed kids who are going to be bringing all sorts of who knows what into the classroom with them, whether that can work. Have you listened carefully enough to the advice that they've proffered?
You know, we have been listening across the board, and I think what parents expect us to do is to ensure that the evidence, science, and medical direction triumphs in the context of a pandemic. I mean, we appreciate our frontline workers very much, but I would submit that the Chief Medical Officer of Health, the foremost and senior-most authority in our province, that has ably guided our cabinet and our province through the worst of this pandemic, has given his stamp of approval. And I think Dr. Williams' endorsement, along with many other leading doctors, including Dr. Mowat, who's the former Chief Medical Officer, have been clear that the plan with layers of prevention in place can keep kids safe. And we're going to continue to listen to those doctors because we have to be responsive to the risk, which is the basis for our investments in nursing, for example, and more cleaning, in testing, and then, of course, in vigorous screening of children before they even enter the schools.
You're quite right. Dr. Williams has given this the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. However, maybe you could explain to people why. I mean, I'm just going to pull this out of thin air here. You know, apparently you can't have more than 50 film goers in a cinema that could seat 400 because of concerns of everybody sitting too close together. But you can put 30 children in a class designed for 30, and that's okay? How does that make sense?
Well, I mean, first off, just the context of what differentiates the experience in our schools, unlike in that theater, we will have cohorts, meaning a staff member in a school will interface with the same group of students. It can be in high schools, for example, in the GTHA, it'll be actually 15 to be more precise in those adapted models that we've imposed on those boards because of the risk. And in elementary, we've seen classroom reductions down province-wide below the averages. We've really encouraged board to do that, and they've been funded to enable them to do that. But going back to the question, in schools, an educator will see the same 15 to 20, 25 students each and every day cohorted. They have access to public health nurses, which of course that cinema would not. Access to testing on site if public health wants to bring in that mobile capacity. That will not exist. We're masking in our schools, which no province has within the classroom. There's many differentiating elements. What's important about our plan is that we've adhered to the public health advice, the overwhelming emerging evidence that you can't look at this in isolation of one-off policies. There's got to be a suite of actions, what many of the medical community will call layers of protection. And we have brought in a comprehensive, fully funded that will enable us to get these kids back, as you said. And as I think many people recognize, it's just so important for the young people's development, for their mental health, their resiliency, that they get back into schools.
No, I take your point on the issue of comparing it to cinemas, but on the other hand, if the idea is to prevent outbreaks of COVID-19 in schools, surely it's common sense that the fewer people you put into a classroom, the less likely you're going to get a COVID outbreak. If that's the case, why would you not want cohorts that are smaller as opposed to larger?
Well, it was our government that did two things to enable smaller cohorts and smaller classrooms, more distancing. First off, we imposed on those higher risk communities, quite a few to be quite fair, right across the GTHA and others, we imposed children in those high school classes, no more than that, cohorted all day. We've also given boards north of $170 million just in the last month. We gave an additional $30 million the month prior. We're talking about $200 million to hire more staff. And all school boards have utilized those funds, provincial dollars, some federal dollars, and even reserve funding. And together, that's enabled them to reduce those classroom sizes. In Toronto, for example, they've imposed a cap of students of 15 in those higher risk communities.
Well, let me show some pictures of that. Because you took a field trip the other day, and I want to actually put a picture up right now to indicate. There's Premier Ford in a school. I think this was Kensington Community School downtown, and this looks like a very bright, well distanced. The desks look very far apart. I hope you can see this picture as well that we've put up here. But the desk looks far apart. It looks like a good, safe classroom. And this was the field trip that you and the Premier took last week. However, here's a different shot that a different teacher took of a Kingston High School classroom the same day. He told us he's expecting 32 to 34 kids to be in his grade 12 class. And the space between the desks is a half a meter, not 1 or 2 meters, which is the recommendation. Minister, how safe does that classroom look to you?
Well, first off, what I've indicated about those early images, on one hand, we were told that school boards have yet to finalize their the number of staff and students within schools because parents have yet to, many parents, there's still 5 to 10% of parents who've yet to make that determination. So on one hand, we're dealing with school boards having to reprofile the number of students and staff. Some educators are now being moved to online based on the amount of parents that have opted their children to go remote. The point is, in the context of that photo, what we expect is once those timetables have been adjusted, once those ratios have been known, and once that information has been shared with the school board, we actually expect school boards to change those realities, reduce the classroom size, repurpose educators. Right now, they're in an unusual position of having to assume, sort of consolidate certain classrooms together in the absence of having a critical mass. Now that more parents are making those decisions, it'll allow them to sort of reconstitute those groups, spread them out more, and ultimately ensure we get that distancing as well as the masking.
So let me just be sure I'm clear on what you're saying here. I mean, admittedly, that Kingston class has not started yet, but are you saying that once it does, that the picture we just showed would be unacceptable in Stephen Lecce's Ontario? Is that fair to say?
What I'm suggesting is that there needs to be distancing in addition to the masking and the hand hygiene, the foundational elements the chief medical officer has requested. School boards know our expectation. They are working around the clock to deliver that, and they continue to do hiring in real time. What we expect is now that we have a better sense of the numbers of students in class and likewise online, time to hire those teachers. Right now, some classes are consolidated because we don't have final numbers. Once that number is known, Steve, and we know that there's another 18 students in grade 7, well, then that's going to enable the school board to hire another educator, homeroom teacher, and split up any of those classes that had been consolidated to date.
Okay,
that's
understood.
Essentially just a holding pattern.
What about,
those changes will happen.
I understand. What about using community centers or libraries, or who knows, even before the weather gets cold, just holding classes outdoors? Are those options being pursued?
Absolutely. Our guidance encourages outdoor experiential learning. The Toronto District School Board, for example, has made that a priority among many other boards. We're really encouraging educators to get outside. It's important for air quality. Of course, we're improving air ventilation in the province, and we've allocated $1.4 billion well before the summer. Give boards that funding to improve air quality, HVAC systems with short and medium term projects, and they're all doing that. Every single board in the province has done that. And then we add an additional $50 million on top of the reserve funding we've unlocked for boards to do that. So we're encouraging a different delivery of education, recognizing it's be a little different this year. But I can tell you that many educators are going to be looking to the outdoors in the fall and the spring and alternate community spaces. The City of Toronto, the Ministry of Infrastructure Ontario, and our province, we're all working with different school boards, municipalities across Ontario to offer up community spaces. And some school boards have done that. Many schools have just repurposed their cafeterias, their libraries, and any ancillary space in the school for the purpose of delivering classes, which is very prudent, and we're happy to see that. In fact, when I was with the premier at that school, we actually saw many, let's say, innovative spaces that were normally for academic purposes being repurposed, and I think that really helps to build confidence to see principals be just adapting to the requirements.
Okay, let me ask you, I think one of the more controversial decisions you and your team has had to make during the course of all of this, which is not requiring students to get an all-clear COVID-19 test if they have had to leave the school out of concerns that they might have COVID-19. Why did you make that decision?
Well, all of the medical outbreak protocols and our health guidance has been informed and developed by the medical community, just so we're clear. I mean, Cabinet has endorsed it and supported it. What we have said is, local health authorities at times will, in fact, say to the student or the cohort or the class or a section of the school that a test may be required. So that can be compelled and directed by the local health authority. I think what we've said, though, is it's not always going to be the case because it's based on the risk and the proximity of those other students to that child that may have a potential case of COVID, or in some cases, a positive case of COVID. Either way, the solution is screening, isolation, and when required, yes, of course, public health is going to encourage students to get tested. Likewise, educators. We've massively, as a province, improved our testing capacity, reaching anywhere between 26 to 30,000 tests per day, reducing the wait times related to that test. And our testing regime is also enhanced, Steve, by the fact that we are unveiling asymptomatic testing of high school students in this province, which is another unique differentiator that will, in part, help mitigate risk. And we've gotten doubling the public health nurses within our schools, which, again, just for context, but 460 odd public health nurses in schools as of, let's say, 2019. Well, this year we're going to have an additional 625. I mean, it's a significant increase. It's going to make a difference for our educators on the ground, and likewise for the kids, just to make sure that there's someone there to support with symptom relief.
Okay, well, let me ask you about those educators then. You mentioned educators on the ground, and I want to ask about them. If a teacher feels that he or she is not safe in a classroom, maybe they can't get the desks more than a meter apart, who knows, maybe the school ran out of masks, who knows what the reason is. If they feel they are unsafe in a classroom, can they decline to go to work in Stephen Lecce's Ontario?
Well, in the province of Ontario, obviously the Ministry of Labour sends in inspectors based on a complaint basis. So when there's issues raised, the Ministry of Labour and the Minister of Labour has said very much that this process, arm's length, will absolutely be followed through on any complaint. There will be a rigorous review. The safety of our staff in the public and private sectors is critical. And of course, I know employers, in this case boards, not the Ministry of Education, take that responsibility seriously for their staff. They're very committed to that sort of education family, want to keep them safe, which is the basis for why we're providing all teachers training.
Okay, what would you say to teachers then?
As well as PPE.
You know that there are some teachers, we saw this story the other day, there's some teachers who are updating their wills. There are some teachers who are very nervous out there. I guess particularly if you're a teacher in your 60s, this would be particularly concerning. What message do you have for them?
Well, I appreciate that, there's a great level of angst across the population. I mean, we're looking, especially, in the United States, looking at images that are very distressing, I think, for all of us as a society. I think my message is to just point to the fact that Canada and Ontario are uniquely positioned to respond. Our track record as a people and as a government to date has allowed us to fundamentally help reduce the risk. We've seen the flattening of that curve over time because we've listened to Dr. Williams, because we've adhered to public health advice, because we've all done our part. And my message to educators is, if we continue to work together as a society and ensure an absolute adherence to public health advice in our schools, on our playgrounds, in our communities, that they can be safe. And that's our aspiration, it's our commitment. And I want them to know we've got their back. It's why we're giving them access to full PPE covered by the province. It's why we're training them on health and safety. It's why we have more nurses on site. And it's why we're enhancing our testing capacity so that if they feel that they want to be tested on a regularized basis, they can be.
Okay, Minister, I know you've got a crazy busy day, so let me just ask you one last question. If the plan that you have laid out works, and we have, nobody's expecting perfection, but if we have relatively few cases of COVID-19 in the schools and the year is able to proceed fairly safely, you will, with justification, I would say, take the credit for a good plan put forward. If this doesn't work, if the schools become, I don't want to say overrun, but if we get too many cases of COVID-19 and the medical officer of health gets concerned and says to you and the Premier, I'm sorry, but you got to shut the schools down again, will you take the blame?
Look, I think what I will point to consistently is that the risk in our schools is reflective of the risk within our communities. And we have a responsibility and moral obligation as a society, as a civil society, to make sure that we do everything humanly possible to enable a child to learn in this province. And so I think what I would point to historically as a people, as a province, is that our people have led the way. The Premier says this all the time. It is not him. It's not, any one politician. It's the population doing their part, sacrificing.
I get you, but you're the education minister, and I suspect people want to hear, the buck stops with me. If it works, I'm going to take the credit. If it doesn't work, I'm responsible.
Well, no, I'm not here to take credit. I'm here to simply provide a protocol that will enable students to be safe. The benchmark of that is if we can get kids to continue learning in our province. We have many backstops to ensure that's the case from an online perspective. But as I've indicated off the top, the risk in our schools is reflective of our community. And if we continue to keep that risk down, if we continue to do our part, we could ensure with success that our kids can learn and do so in a safe manner. And I think that's important. for them, for their mental health and the resilience of them. And likewise, important for the parents of this province that want to get back into the labor market for the have yet to do so. So this is important for a variety of reasons. We'll continue to listen to the chief medical officer. This plan is comprehensive, it's fully funded, it's evidence informed, and we'll continue to be there for our students. We'll do whatever it takes. If we have to scale it up, Steve, we will do more to respond to the risk this fall.
That's Stephen Lecce, the Minister of Education for the province of Ontario. Minister, we are grateful that you spared so much time for us tonight on TVO. Thanks and good luck.
Thank you.
It's been 6 months since this pandemic threw everything up into the air, and if politics slid into the background in the early days, they came roaring back this summer. The WE scandal for the Liberals, a new leader for the Conservatives, and election talk bubbling up as the fall session approaches. Let's get caught up and look ahead. And as is our custom here on the agenda, we introduce our guests from furthest away to closest to our studio, and with that we welcome, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Shachi Kurl, Executive Director of the nonpartisan public opinion research organization, the Angus Reid Institute. In Brooklyn, New York, Sean Speer, professor at the University of Toronto's Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and a senior fellow for fiscal policy at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. In Point Comfort, Quebec, Point Comfort, as we might say in English, Jeffrey Simpson, former national affairs columnist with the Globe and Mail, now a fellow at the University of Ottawa. And here in the provincial capital, journalist Vicky Mochama, whose work has appeared in The Walrus, Washington Post, and Toronto Star, among many others. It's good to see you back for our first program of this, our 15th season. And let's start by just putting some stats on the record here, because as of Labor Day weekend, Canada has recorded since March more than 9,000 fatalities due to COVID-19. But let's break that down so we can compare ourselves with other countries. On a per capita basis, that's about 248 fatalities per million population, which compares us rather well with the United Kingdom, which is up at 624 deaths per million population, Sweden at 572, the United States at 566. However, many countries have also done better than us. Germany has only 112 fatalities per million population, Finland only 61, and South Korea fewer than 7 fatalities per million population. So Shachi, let's start with you. You obviously survey the Canadian population on a frequent basis, and I'd like you to give us a sense about how Canadians feel their federal and provincial governments have done in fighting COVID-19.
Look, through good times and bad, and let's face it, the numbers lately have been getting worse coast to coast, starting in British Columbia, where we're starting to see, I think, the beginnings of, some are calling it a second wave, others are just calling it really a slide back into new infections, new cases. We're seeing that in Ontario and Quebec as well. Despite this, what we know is that the pandemic has really been something that's brought Canadians together, and it's really had them rallying around their politicians and vice versa. So we are generally a pretty BS-proof population when it comes to judging our politicians. We look to them with a fairly cynical or jaded eye. The pandemic has changed that. So you see sustained high approval ratings for provincial premiers across the country, coast to coast. One notable exception is Alberta, but otherwise provincial premiers are doing really well. And with the exception of a slide that is directly attributable to the WE scandal, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has seen his numbers really rebound over the last year. And even post-WE scandal, because of the pandemic, his numbers are actually higher now than they were in terms of approval than they were right after last year's election, at a time where he won an election. Canadians were still annoyed with him. That's resolved itself to an extent. We'll see how long that lasts.
Okay, thanks for that national overview. And now let's focus in some more. Jeffrey, you're in Quebec, so let's start there. If you look at the numbers out of the province of Quebec, they've had roughly twice as many people succumb to COVID-19 as those of us here in the province of Ontario, and yet, you know, many millions fewer population. I think they've got 9 million compared to our 14.5. What does that tell you about how well or not Quebec has managed to deal with this pandemic?
There's a slight mystery to me, and you just put your finger on it, which is that Quebec has skewed the national numbers because their infection rate and death rate is much higher than anywhere else. If you subtracted Quebec, I know this is, if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bus, but I mean, if you subtracted Quebec from the national numbers, they'd be much, much lower. And the interesting thing is, Monsieur Legault, the premier, despite his province having these high numbers relative to the rest of the country, and these have been widely reported in Quebec, there's no secret here, his popularity has come down, but it's still very high. And you might have thought, as Quebecers say, hey, how come our numbers are appreciably worse than Ontario, let alone the rest of the country? He would suffer, but that's actually not what's happened. He's remained quite popular. What I like most about what's gone on at the governmental level, as an old veteran of federal provincial affairs, is that the two levels of government have by and large gotten along exceptionally well. And they've gotten along interprovincially too. You mentioned Ontario and Quebec. Ontario sent equipment to Quebec when Quebec needed it. That was a very fraternal thing to do. We in Ottawa didn't much like it when Quebec closed the bridges from Ottawa to Quebec, but you know, that's over now. So instead of the usual bickering between the two levels of government, I think Canadians, back to the first points that were made, one of the reasons why they're giving credit to the governments is that they work hard to get along. And as we see south of the border, the tensions between Washington and a number of the states have been endemic and polarizing, and that has not happened here.
Well, let me put that to Vicki, because that is certainly one of the hugest distinctions between how our federal and provincial versus the American national and state governments. That's a huge difference there. And I wonder, Vicki, if one of the reasons we are giving our politicians high marks is because compared to down south, we look like we're doing so much better. You think that's part of it?
Yeah, I think people are willing to credit the Canadian federal and provincial governments for not necessarily falling victim to some of the bickering and back and forth that you've seen in the United States. But there has been a little bit of bickering, there has been a little bit of back and forth. And I think what that remains are still some of the gaps that the both federal and provincial governments need to look at and understand. For example, the challenge with migrant workers and the rate of infection there, the challenges in care homes and the families' concerns there. And then the airport, I think, still remains a critical one for people to ensure that the federal, provincial, and municipal governments are dealing with the influx of people who are coming in or returning home.
Sean, it is a bit of a Canadian value to think that as long as we think we're doing better than the Americans, we feel pretty good about the world. Do you think that's at play here?
I think it definitely is, Steve. You know as well as anyone that the Canadian public is inundated with news and reporting from the United States, and so it's just natural for Canadians to evaluate the Canadian experience relative to the acrimony and tumultuousness of the American response. I also think it's important to recognize that ideology goes out the window in the context of an emergency. Our politicians have been responding to twin crises, a public health crisis and an economic crisis, for which there is really no playbook. And so I think it's logical that ideological and partisan difference have been minimized as our political class has sought to respond to this extraordinary crisis. But as you said in your introduction, Steve, politics is starting to reemerge. And similarly, I think that's logical. We're beginning to see a nascent debate about what the contours of a recovery plan ought to look like. And that is going to reflect ideological differences about the role of government, about the limits of government action. And I actually think we're on the cusp of what will no doubt be a tumultuous, but I think actually quite an exciting and dynamic debate about the future orientation of Canadian policymaking at the national level, but also at the subnational level.
We will get to that later in our conversation, but I'd like to put a third leg on that stool, if you like. And Vicki, maybe I'll start with you on this. It's not just a health crisis and an economic crisis. There's been a racial reckoning across North America right now, the likes of which we haven't seen in 50 years. And I, obviously starting with George Floyd being caught murdered on video in Minneapolis. Vicki, how much do you think our subsequent politics and developments have been influenced by that third crisis that we're undergoing right now as well?
I think on that front, the questions raised by the protesters around police oversight, police reform, and the abolition of a carceral state haven't necessarily been met by politicians. But I think there has been an understanding from the public that this moment and this crisis is being experienced differently by different races, by different ethnic groups, and by Indigenous peoples and their nations. And so I think that awareness is much more broad than it might have been before. And so the moment of racial reckoning is happening at a more interpersonal level than necessarily at a political level. I don't see politicians answering these questions about the funding or defunding of police. You don't necessarily see federal answers about systemic racism within the RCMP, but you do hear more questions, more concerns, and much more understanding from individual Canadians about how race impacts our politics.
I guess I should be careful with my language here, Shachi, before I get you to comment. The police officer in question in Minneapolis hasn't been found guilty of murder yet. Let's just say the killing of George Floyd, what many people certainly thought was a murder. Shachi, do you want to weigh in on how the racial reckoning south of the border has affected our politics and our society here?
I can't say as yet, based on the data that we're seeing, that it is necessarily affecting our politics. I don't think we're there yet, but Canadians are engaged on this issue. They're paying attention. They are connecting the dots. And what's really interesting is even though they themselves may be reporting that their own interactions with police, for the large part, again, this is so much depending on where you live and which level of police you're dealing with. Is it your local police? Is it city police? Is it the RCMP? Regardless, when we talk to Canadians about this issue, across the board, they will generally say, look, my interactions have been okay, but I perceive a major problem in the way police are dealing with people of color, with Black people, with Indigenous people. So there is an engagement, there is an awareness, and there is a naming of the problem and an identification of the problem. Where Canadians are in terms of what do we do next, who's accountable, who should be accountable, should there be defunding, what should the future of policing and public interaction look like? I think those are things that everyone is still working through as they come to terms with what's been happening both south of the border, but also here in Canada. And I would just point out, this doesn't start with George Floyd, Steve. This goes back so far, and there are so many examples of it over time. So many Canadian instances caught on camera as well, particularly in relation to our Indigenous populations. So this is something that Canadians are starting to come to terms with, but they don't necessarily have clear answers on or are indicating that this is where they want their policymakers to go.
Jeffrey Simpson, what would you add to that?
I would add that I would agree. We have not had among our political parties, nor between the federal and provincial governments, polarized arguments about this. I'm not aware of any political people here, I stand to be corrected, who've tried to make hay out of the two sides of the argument that we see in the United States. So that we haven't had polarization on the issue. Is there more awareness? Yes. Defunding of the police is overwhelmingly rejected in the United States, and if it was ever put in Canada, it would be overwhelmingly rejected here. Reform of the police, yes. Defunding makes almost no sense. There is a difference in terms of sheer numbers because the share of the Canadian population that is Black, according to Statistics Canada in 2016, was 3.6%, where it's about 10% in the United States. The Indigenous issue here has a salience that it does not have in the United States. It's true in the United States, people are talking about Black, or I should say minority groups, and Native people, as they call them there. But here, the Indigenous element, which has a whole dimension to it that doesn't affect the Blacks in Canada, is much, much more salient and has led to things like the taking away of the names or the renaming of institutions and structures in Canada, which 10 years ago would not have been part of our discourse.
Sean, just before I get you to weigh in on this, maybe I should preface it by saying Jeffrey's quite right that we haven't had the polarization among our political class here as they have in the United States. But there was a moment the other day on Twitter when the leader of the New Democrats tweeted that the poor woman who was suffering from mental health issues in Toronto and who barricaded herself on a balcony and then tried to leap to another balcony, missed, and leapt to her death. Jagmeet Singh, or somebody on his behalf, tweeted that woman would still be alive if not for the intervention of the Toronto police, which, immediately launched a Twitter explosion saying that he had overreached and was playing politics with all of this. There's a lot to make sense of all there, but perhaps you could weigh in on all of that.
Well, I think it's a good example, Steve, of our political class struggling to bring expression to this set of issues in the realm of politics. We've seen growing cases of protesters targeting statues and other manifestations of Canadian history. I think we're increasingly seeing pushback against those developments on the political right. It's an issue, for instance, that Aaron O'Toole seems keen to champion in his new role as leader of the Conservative Party. Obviously, these are complex and multifaceted issues for which there are no simple answers. But I would emphasize that this social angst is occurring against the backdrop of precipitous economic contraction and record joblessness. And it seems to me, these problems will hardly be solved by more economic growth. I think the restoration of economic growth and economic activity is a critical ingredient to lowering the temperatures in our countries. George Will likes to say, Steve, that the difference between 2% growth and 3% growth isn't 1%, it's 50%. And I think this is only one of the reasons why we're seeing our policymakers at the national level and the subnational level start to shift their thinking from stabilizing the economy and addressing the immediate public health dimensions of the coronavirus and focusing more on restoring economic activity and getting people back to work.
George Will is a smart guy who could always do math. There's no doubt about that. Well, speaking of math, let's bring some polling up here, and I'm going to get you folks to comment on this. These have been astonishingly cataclysmic times for our world and our country. And yet, look at the public opinion polling when you ask people what they think of the federal parties as currently constituted in the House of Commons. Shall we bring these up, Sheldon? Here we go. Okay, current party support. These are Angus Reid numbers. Shachi, these are your numbers. And let's go through. Here's where we are right now. Liberals, 35%. Conservatives, 35%. NDP at 17%. Bloc Québécois at 7%. And the Greens at 4%. Now, if you compare those numbers today to where we were on Election Day last October, the Liberals are literally up less than 2 points. The Conservatives are literally up about a point. The NDP are down about a point. The Bloc are, down about a half a point. And the Greens are down about 2.5 points. And Shachi, I want to know, how is it possible in these remarkably tumultuous times that there's so little dynamism in the political polling these days?
So delicious. Where do you want me to start, Steve? So
at the beginning?
This is a massive survey that we did. More than 5,000 Canadians surveyed in the last week of August, really in the days right after Mr. O'Toole's ascension as Conservative Party leader. So what you're seeing is a few things. Yes, in essence, if you go back 11 months, the numbers look remarkably consistent. But what this represents since the beginning of May is actually a slight drop for the Liberals. They've largely stabilized with perhaps a few flesh wounds, but nothing fatal coming out of the Lee scandal, but also a bump of a handful of points for the Conservatives with a new leader who is now having to do the work of attempting to reappeal to voters that this party has in the last 2-3 years had very difficult times getting traction with. So what do you hear Aaron O'Toole talking about immediately in the wee hours right after his win as leader. He says, if you live in a city, the Conservative Party is here for you. If you're a woman, the Conservative Party is here for you. If you are a person of color or an immigrant, you have a home in the party. These are messages that what we would call centrists or swing voters have not been hearing from Conservative leadership in a while. And so that's been put down very forcefully by Aaron O'Toole. He's also tried to move to quelch some of the issues around social values. So he's saying, look, I'm pro-choice, I don't have an issue with same-sex marriage, I'd march in a pride parade, et cetera, et cetera. Why is he doing those things? Because the party, if it wants to win the next election, needs to win in Ontario, where it's currently sitting 7 points back from the Liberals, needs to win in cities where it is significantly trailing the Liberal Party, and needs to win with women. And right now there is something like a 12-point gap between women voters in terms of whether they would choose Justin Trudeau or Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives. And ultimately, what we note with all of this in the mix is that left of center voters, if they think the Conservatives are at within striking distance of forming government, will recoalesce under the Liberals and back under the big red tent to prevent the Conservatives from winning. Aaron O'Toole needs to be able to say, hey, we've got a big tent too where everyone's welcome. And he needs to be able to convince people of that. He's saying it. We have to now watch to see if he's got the room to grow and he can make the case.
And he put a social media video up yesterday on Labor Day, which was probably the most pro-labor, pro-union statement that I've ever seen any Conservative leader at any level of government give, in decades, to be sure. I mean, it was really quite something. Jeffrey, if you're the Prime Minister right now, you've got a throne speech coming up this fall. Do you secretly, or maybe not so secretly, want to lose this throne speech, given the competitive nature you find yourself in the polling today?
I don't think you want to lose it on the throne speech. Throne speeches are just declarations of intentions. I think the budget is going to be far more consequential. And I don't know when the budget will be. I have a fairly good idea of its general direction, not close to the government anymore, but you can just read the tea leaves. They're going to have a budget that is extremely expansionist. They're going to spend a lot of money on social programs, whether it's pharmacies or pharmacare or income support. They're going to have all kinds of green subsidies. I think the Liberals have decided that the Conservatives have 30 to 35% of the election, come rain or shine. You can have a poor leader like the previous one. You can have a better leader. They're in 30 or 35%. And we can only form a government with a majority if we eat into the Greens, Bloc Québécois, and the NDP. And that requires tilting far to the left. The second point I'd make to underscore that is that when Mr. Morneau was shown the door, I mean, he resigned because he could see what was happening to him. He had no support in the cabinet. The Liberals have no business Liberals anymore. The Liberal cabinets in the past, going back to Pierre Trudeau and Jean Chrétien, always had spending Liberals and business Liberals. This government has no business Liberals. They're all spending Liberals, every one of them, including the Prime Minister. So the next budget is going to be extremely expansionist. Money is going to be spent left, right, and center. And it's at that point that they'll use the skills that we've heard today from our polling friends as to whether they should go for an election or not. The last point I'd make is elections are very unpredictable. Mr. Trudeau ought to know that because the first time he won, he started the campaign in third place and Tom Mulcair was measuring the drapes at 24 Sussex Drive. And the Liberals won the election. Last time, they sunk during the campaign. By the way, I think it's interesting that the polling numbers show the Liberals ahead by 12 points among women. But if they're even with the Conservatives overall, they got to be about 10 or 12 points behind among men. And that's a bit of a problem for the Liberals. It's hard to form a majority when you're 12 points behind among men.
Sean, I'd ask you to weigh in on the fortunes or the potential fortunes of the Conservatives at the moment, in as much as you've got the WE scandal, which admittedly is out of the headlines right now, but it certainly has a place in the public consciousness. Having said that, Aaron O'Toole's barely got his feet wet as the leader. How concerned would you be about pulling down the government's throne speech, knowing that you've got a guy in his literally first months as leader at the helm right now?
Well, he's certainly on a steep learning curve, Steve, given the prospect or potential for an election campaign mere weeks away. To your question to Jeffrey about whether Mr. Trudeau and his team secretly would like an election? I think the answer is yes. The one entity not on Satchi's polling figures is Donald Trump, who is deeply unpopular with the Canadian public. And I think Mr. Trudeau's team would actually like the prospect of running a parallel campaign in Canada while the U.S. presidential election slumps on. Mr. Trump will be counted on to say outrageous things, and Mr. O'Toole would be forced to spend most of the campaign responding to questions about Mr. Trump and the extent to which his party and his vision converges or diverges with the polarizing president. The other reason why I think that the Liberals would like a campaign is if they're brought back with the majority, they'll be able to put the stick in the spokes of the We investigation. The only reason we've gotten as far as we have, of course, is because opposition members presently make up a majority of the members on the committees investigating the grant to the We charity. Prorogation was a short-term attempt to slow that process down. A new majority mandate would be what the Liberals need to shut it down. And so I think all opposition leaders, including Mr. O'Toole, face a difficult question in how they ultimately vote on the speech from the throne and perhaps a federal budget. I think there'll be plenty there for the opposition, for the Conservatives to oppose and reject. I think more pressure will be on Mr. Singh and whether the new Democratic Party is prepared to support the Liberals, given the likelihood, as Jeffrey says, that the speech from the throne and the budget will advance several progressive priorities. Is that enough to secure NDP support or not, I think will be the major question in the upcoming parliamentary session.
And let me get Vicky to pick up the story there on the Social Democratic part of the political ledger. And to that end, Vicky, maybe I can ask you to react to it in this respect. You know, for the last two Democratic presidential nomination races, a self-declared septuagenarian socialist has really been right there almost at the finish line, running extremely competitively. Senator, and if you look at the current Democratic Party, you know, you've got, I guess they call themselves the Squad, led by AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a congresswoman from New York, you know, who's a self-declared socialist and unapologetically arguing for a much larger role for government. They are very popular in some parts of the United States right now in a way that the NDP just is not in Canada. I guess the question is, how does the NDP maybe try to benefit from some of that radicalism happening in the United States right now?
Well, I think the question really for Jagmeet Singh is, has he been able to carry the momentum of his win into his role as leader of the party? And I don't think we've necessarily seen that from him. And part of it is, you know, the lack of cash that they have as a party. And so the idea of an election for them, I think, is not necessarily, you know, one they want to answer, and they don't want to head into an election. But, you know, it's also the fact that they're unwilling to be, you know, unabashed supporters of labor efforts, of rights for workers, of speaking in the language of socialism. Part of the challenge of that is that the American socialists are asking for some of the things Canada already has. They're asking for universal health care. They're asking for expanded sick leave. They're asking for things that a lot of Canadians, depending on where you are in the country, already have. So what does that kind of socialism that is popular in the NDP amongst young women who largely support the NDP, where is that going to come from for Jagmeet Singh? How is he going to articulate that? And so I think that's really the question for the NDP, the Liberals, and the Conservatives. In that video message from Erin O'Toole on Labor Day, he was speaking about class. And, you know, all three of them have backed down off the questions of race, but I think are going to spend the next few months, election or no, talking about the class impact that this pandemic has had and how that has affected different people depending on where you are. They're possibly going to go after the middle class, but I think the Liberals, with the teasers that they put out about the budget, are maybe returning to Justin Trudeau's attempts at that fairness agenda, at going after the wealthy, at expanding social programs, and are maybe going to now listen to what the NDP have to say about questions around a universal basic income, expanded transit supports, green tax credits, all of those things. So I think for Jagmeet Singh, he's always pulled back on some of the NDP's agenda, but now has a window and an opportunity to be a little bit more aggressive and more vociferous in his support of what the NDP has to offer.
Gotcha. Less than 5 minutes to go, folks. Let me put one more thing on the table here and see if I can get everybody to comment on it. Sadly, just briefly, because we're running out of time. Sheldon, let's bring these stats up, shall we? What do Canadians care about? You're not going to be shocked to hear number one on that list, 35% of the people identified the response to COVID-19. But if you look at number two, which is healthcare at 32%, you put them together, that's basically 2/3 of Canadians who say COVID-19/healthcare is top of mind right now. 3 in 10 identify climate change, almost 3 in 10 the economy. Government spending and deficit, less than 1/4 of the people identified that as an issue. Income inequality is down to just over 2 in 10. Corruption, a little under 2 in 10. Jobs, under 2 in 10. Public safety, 1 in 10. Shachi, I need a smart pollster here to tell me what that ranking suggests about Canadians' priorities at the moment.
Well, again, it's all about digging beneath those top line numbers, Steve. So if anyone really wants to dig in, they can actually go to angusreid.org and read all the data, and I encourage you to do that. So with the time we have, I'll say a couple of things. First of all, look for the Trudeau government to really almost go back to the future on this, or go back to the past. They are going to run the playbook from the early 80s. Not all of us were around for it. I think Jeffrey Simpson was, and I say that with great respect because he is a man of experience, but really where the then former Trudeau Liberals, the Pierre Trudeau Liberals, really looked to bridging the inequality, the income gap, trying to get people into affordable and accessible housing. Look for them to talk about a lot of those things, because those are issues against the backdrop of a pandemic that have really been revealed, right? So we're learning more about just how precarious work is for people, just how high the cost of living is for people doing precarious work. Now, when you look at who cares about what, absolutely, if you're a woman, if you are left of center in this country, pandemic response, healthcare at the top of the list. If you are an older man, 55 plus, living in Alberta, Saskatchewan, northern Manitoba, parts of Ontario, you are much more occupied with the deficit and spending. But one last point on deficit and government spending. Canadians today are less exercised about this than, say, they were, when our deficit was far smaller. So we're looking at a budget deficit of $343 billion. You go back a year and a half when this was an issue we were talking about more, and the budget deficit was something like $19 billion. So this is all about how these issues are introduced into the public discourse. We've heard Aaron O'Toole trying to talk about it, talking about his timeline to pay it down. And really the only caveat is Canadians will focus on issues of deficit when they are exercised and concerned about it. Right now, they're more exercised and concerned, particularly if they're transitioning off of CERB or dealing in precarious industry work, where the next paycheck is going to come from, how they're going to get their kids back to school, what's going on with their elderly parents.
Okay, I've got about 45 seconds left for each of you to weigh in on. And Jeffrey, let me go to you first. The guy who currently has the job you used to have, namely the best real estate in the Globe and Mail, Andrew Coyne, says the government's cleverness has been not only convincing people that they can get something for nothing, but that they can get everything for nothing. Do you think he's onto something here?
I don't comment on what other journalists said when I was a journalist. I'm not going to comment now. I'd simply say, I don't think anybody can understand what $343 billion deficit is. I mean, nobody's ever seen anything like that in their entire lives, so they can't actually relate to it. Maybe what's happening. No, I think that the COVID situation, and we talked at the beginning of our discussion about how governments were generally seen to have done this well. People are not exercised by the deficit because they haven't had to pay the bills. At some point, the bills will come due because interest rates will rise, or the rating agencies will put Canada on notice, or the Bank of Canada will enter the fray and not continue to print the kind of money it has. And at that point, people will begin to say, hey, this can't go on. I think we'll be a decade trying to climb out of this deficit situation. I don't think it's going to come easy, and that's going to be a long, difficult slog.
Vicky, can you be a conservative today and campaign on reducing debt and deficit?
I'm sure there's ways it could work, but I'd love to see how that looks for generations like mine, millennials, who have only dealt with declining economies, whether from the global financial crisis or heading into, your adulthood where jobs were less of a certainty, where housing only expanded in cost. And so for conservatives to argue on government spending less to support individuals, they'd really have to figure out how to toe that fine line between the challenges people have had for the last 15 to 20 years trying to create lifestyles and create families, as well as what the government can do and is able to do.
Sean, you get the last word. How do conservatives, which like debt and deficit as their issues, how do they campaign on those today?
I agree with Vicky. It's a challenge, that's for sure. But I would say the opposite is true as well, Steve. I think Mr. Trudeau, Ms. Freeland, if they're interpreting a wide interest on the part of the Canadian public for a radical transformation of government, I think they may be wrong. I think a message of a return to normalcy may be as potent as one for reconceptualizing government and reconceptualizing its role in the economy. And ultimately, I think these will be the source of a big ideological, intellectual conflict whenever the next election occurs.
Good stuff. Thanks, everybody. Great discussion. Shachi Curl, Jeffrey Simpson, Sean Spear, Vicky Mochama. It's really great of all of you to join us on this first program of our 15th season here on The Agenda. All good wishes to all of you, and stay safe, okay?
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
And that is the first episode of Season 15 of The Agenda on this Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. Whatever concerns we have about contracting COVID-19, increasingly those are being balanced with economic concerns. Tomorrow we're examining the prospects for recovery here and around the world. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Looking for more of TVO's in-depth current affairs and documentaries? Visit tvo.org/daily and sign up for our daily newsletter with links to agenda interviews, Steve Paikin's blogs, and preview our upcoming documentaries. That's all at tvo.org/daily.